Good morning, everybody. We'll probably wait just a few minutes for a few more people to come, but thank you so much for coming to our third summer story hour. Today, as you'll see, we have our children's book author, John Gray, with us. He's going to read Sweet Polly Petals. And everybody on this meeting is probably familiar with John, but by way of formal introduction, John Gray is an Emmy Award-winning television journalist and columnist in upstate New York. He has written three popular children's books that you may have heard of: God Needed a Puppy, Keller's Heart, and Sweet Polly Petals that you will hear today. John lives in Albany with his wife Courtney and their four rescue dogs. And before we start, please take a moment to locate the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and the chat bar, because after John reads the story, we'd love to hear any thoughts, questions, or anything you want to say. We'll take anything we have time for. Sweet Polly Petals is a fairy tale set not in some mystical land far away, but in any town in our country. The hero of the story is a little girl named Polly, who loves going to the park with her mom. One day she notices homeless people sleeping on benches, and she asks her mom, why are they there? And her mother says, well, they're good people, but they've lost their way. And so there's a sweet story that develops that you're about to hear. John, before we start, is there anything you want to say about how this story came about and what inspired you?
First of all, you can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, you know, it's funny. Of all the stories, sometimes I get one image in my mind and a story builds from that image. And I don't know why, but I kept picturing a little girl holding a potted orchid. And I didn't know who she was or why she had the flower. It just popped in my head one day and I sort of dismissed it. And I always tell people, you might have a good idea when you try to forget about it and it keeps circling back around your mind, kind of tapping your shoulder, going, "Hey, I'm still here." And that's how sometimes a story idea comes from. And one day, in every town in the country, there's intersections or red lights where people who are homeless, perhaps, and they're like collecting money. They'll hold a little sign up. I was at an area like that around Albany, and I saw someone who I'd seen before out there with a sign and asking for money of motorists who were stopped, and somehow in my mind married those two images together of somebody in need and this little girl with the flower, and that's kind of how the story was born. So you never know where a story will come from.
Yeah.
I always like to think of writers. I tell people who ask me about writing, you pick up little things along the way, and like it's almost like you have a little knapsack on your back and you throw them in there, not knowing if you'll ever need them. And then someday when you're putting a story together, you kind of shake the knapsack out and the things that you collect and go, oh, that I could use that here in this story. I'm glad I saved that. Anybody, I'm not very handy with my hands, but anybody who's got someone in their life who's got a big like work shed where they have all their tools, you'll see they save jars full of things. You say, what's that for? You say, well, that came off an old hinge and I really don't need it now, but I might need it someday. And that's kind of the same thing.
Absolutely. My husband's a little bit like that, so I can relate. All right, great. Well, without further ado, I'll just put myself off camera and John is going to read Sweet Polly Petals.
Got you. Thank you so much, Catherine. And for those who are wondering where the puppies are right now, I've got Eli sleeping at my feet. It's right there. And Bella's in her crate. And that's Rosie back over there. And Sebastian is on a couch in the other room. So he loves to sleep on a couch in the living room. I'm going to put the phone up here so I can balance it a little bit. And if you've never read the story, it's not a very long story, I promise. But again, it's called Sweet Polly Petals. And when you hear the story, you'll understand why. I dedicated this book to this. I'll read what it says. For every kind soul who's dedicated their life to helping the less fortunate and easing the world's suffering. So I've done a lot of stories over the years in homeless shelters and those who try to help people get back on their feet, rehab centers, domestic violence, anybody who dedicates their life to that kind of work. It's tough work. It doesn't pay a lot, but I really think they're on a quest from God to help the world, and that's why they do it. It's never about the money for them. And here's how the story begins with a little picture of a butterfly. It says, there once was a town just like yours with a girl named Sweet Polly Petals. Everyone called her that because of a flower, a wish, and a little bit of magic. Pancakes and rainbows, jelly beans and butterfly kisses. Polly had lots of favorite things, but nothing made her happier than playing in the park. And there's the park near her house, which anybody who's ever been to Albany knows Washington Park. That's kind of what I had in mind, or the crossings even in Colony. That park had a bright yellow swing and a pond with silly ducks and tall trees, perfect to have a picnic under. There were benches to sit on, although sometimes Polly saw people sleeping on them. How strange, she thought. People usually sleep on beds. Who are they? She asked her mom. After a thoughtful pause, her mother said, just regular people who lost their way, sweetheart. Polly responded innocently, can we help them find it again? Do they need a map? Her mom hugged her and said, no, dear. Mostly they need food, a home, someone to care. A few days later, Polly and her mom were back at the park for a picnic, and on that bench, she noticed a woman she'd seen before. The woman wore a baggy coat and was always holding a potted flower. There's the woman right there. You see? As her mom spread the blanket under the tree, Polly walked over with her peanut butter sandwich and a bottle of water. Hi, I'm Polly, she began. Are you hungry? I don't mind sharing. The woman smiled warmly and said, thank you, hon. I'm not hungry, but my flower is thirsty. It was a beautiful purple orchid. Polly poured her water into the pot, and the petals on the orchid seemed to glow with delight. The woman then said, do you believe in magic? I asked because this is a magic orchid. Polly scratched her head and said, it just looks like a regular flower to me. And there's the orchid right there. The woman then explained, this orchid can grant wishes, but there are two things to understand. First, you can't ask for anything for yourself. Polly thought for a second and said, so you have to help other people with your wish. That's right, she responded. And the second thing is, every time a wish is granted, the flower will lose a petal. Polly could see that there were only 4 petals left on this orchid. So 4 wishes, she asked. That's right, just 4 left, the woman said. Here, I want you to have it. Just remember what I said. So she's given Polly the orchid for being such a sweet child. Now, holding the flower, she brings it over to her mom. Holding the flower, Polly returns to her mom and shared the story about the orchid. She could tell her mother was doubtful. So let's test it out, Polly said. I wish all the people in this park would get a sweet treat right now. Well, just then they heard the music of an ice cream truck approaching. The man pulled into the park and told everyone his freezer was broken and everything in the truck was melting. So if anybody wanted free ice cream, they could have it. And there's everybody running to the ice cream truck. Free ice cream. Polly looked at the orchid and a single purple petal fell to the soft grass. She scooped it up and she put it in her pocket. So for anybody, the kids watching right now, her first wish was everybody get a sweet treat. And the truck showed up and everybody got a treat. So it worked. Walking home with her mom, she saw a woman standing next to a car with a flat tire. She looked so upset. Polly felt bad, so she said out loud, I wish that woman had help. Just then, a police officer drove by, saw the woman, and he got out and he helped change the tire. Another petal from the orchid fell to the ground and Polly placed it gently in her pocket. So now she's used 2 of the 4 wishes. When they returned home, she saw the boy next door was crying. What's wrong, Tommy? She asked. I left the gate open and my dog Eli ran away. Polly looked at her mom and then down at the orchid. There were only 2 petals left. Should I? She asked. It's up to you, sweetie, her mom replied. Polly put her hand on Tommy's shoulder and said, it's going to be all right. I wish Eli would come home. Just then they heard the phone ringing in the house. Tommy's mom answered and told everyone that a kind stranger had just found Eli a mile away and he was safe. Polly put her hand out and caught the 3rd petal as it fell. That night, Polly sat on her bed and stared at the last petal on the orchid, wondering what should be her last wish. Remember, she only has 1 left. So she's thinking about it. The next morning, Polly knew. Polly went back to the park and she found that woman sitting on the bench. She handed her the orchid with 1 petal remaining and said, my final wish is to help you. I want you to have a home. The woman's eyes filled with tears because of Polly's kindness. Just then, the last petal fell into Polly's tiny hand, and she smiled because she knew the woman in the park was going to be okay. But that's not the end of the story. There's one last thing you need to do, the woman told Polly. Take the petals in your pocket and plant them in your yard. Only this time, I want you to make a wish for yourself, something big and important. Polly buried the petals, as she was told, and she went to sleep. The next morning, when she woke up, her yard was filled with hundreds of bright orchids. That's her backyard. Look at that. Somehow, like magic, they had grown overnight. The little girl's wish was to continue granting wishes. And now the child they called Sweet Polly Petals had enough petals to help everyone. And that's the story of Sweet Polly Petals. In the back of the book, it talks about me a little bit. Then it tells you about the illustrator, a woman named Shauna Brickell. And her name is right there on the cover. And it's as big as my name because her job is just as important as mine. I came up with the story, but Shauna drew all these beautiful, painted all these beautiful pictures. And what I do when I have an illustrator like Shauna is I would send her the book, and it would take her weeks to paint all these pictures. And she would send them and say, does this look right? You know, on this page, we talk about this. Does this look good? And I'd say, yeah, could you add a little more, to make the sky a little more orange? Sure. Then she sent me another picture. I go, oh, perfect. Then you move on to something else. In the end, that's how you get the book. So I hope you enjoyed Sweet Polly Petals. And you may have noticed a few things in there. One, the dog that got out was named Eli. And that was a picture of Eli in the book. That's based on Eli when he was a baby. He's taking a nap right now. And I'm going to show you how smart Eli is. It's hot out today. Notice what's right behind Eli's back. That little thing lets the air conditioner, it shoots the cold air up. So Eli's laying right in the cold air. So he's very smart. There was another picture in there with the ice cream truck where all the kids are running. There's a German Shepherd in there. And that one looks like Sebastian. So pretty much in all my books, Shauna hides my dogs in different places. It's kind of fun to look around and find them.
Can
But
you tell us, John, about how you first got started with Shauna?
yeah, Shauna and I did not know each other. She lives around Virginia, not far from like Washington D.C., the White House. And Shauna grew up wanting to be an artist. She's one of those people who could just always draw. And she, as a little girl, said, "I think I might want to be an artist and do paintings and things." And people who knew her were like, "Well, it's really hard to make a living doing that." And so she kind of like listened to them and we're like, "Well, I'll get a different job that I can really count on." And she did. She went to school. She has a good job. But she still liked to draw and paint on the side. But she always wanted to do a children's book. And when I had a little puppy named Samuel who died, um, I wanted to write a story about him. And unbeknownst to me, Shauna, who was on my Facebook page and I never spoken to even once, not even a messaging back and forth, she felt bad about Samuel dying and he was only a puppy. So she did this painting of him. And it was our favorite picture of Samuel. She went through our pictures. She saw one she liked, which was our favorite picture, but she didn't know that. And she did this beautiful painting. And when I finished the book, I messaged her and I said, she wanted to send us a picture in the mail. I said, I wrote this children's book. Could I use this for the cover of the book? And she said, of course. And she said, well, who's doing the other pictures in the book? And I said, I don't have anybody. I was going to use what they call stock photos. Those are just general pictures that a publisher can use. And she said, well, send me the book and I'll do all the paintings. And some of the paintings in God Needed a Puppy, that was the first children's book, are just amazing. I swear you could hang them on a museum wall. They're that beautiful. It's unbelievable, her talent. There's pictures of Freddie the Fox in there. This fox, you can see every little whisker on his face. It's just beautiful. But that's how we met. And when we had a book signing for God Needed a Puppy, Shauna drove up with her whole family and stayed up here. And we've been together a few times for book signings. It's just a wonderful person. But what's interesting about that, Catherine, is that she did it out of the kindness of her heart. There was nothing in it for her. She just felt bad about this family in New York that lost their puppy and wanted to do something to make me feel a little bit less sad. And that's why she did the painting. And out of that kindness, this whole relationship grew, which is just great.
That's wonderful. And she collaborated with you on Keller's Heart and on Sweet Polly Petals. So it's been
Yep, all three books, and also the cover of Manchester Christmas is also her.
oh, I did not actually realize
Yeah.
that. Awesome.
Yes. Yes. And that cover was tricky because we wanted it to be a little brighter and it was a little darker, and she went through several drafts. So I think we were driving her crazy. We're like, can you make that one pine tree a little pointier? And
Totally.
poor Shauna. Yeah.
The sacrifice of the illustrator, but it catches
Yes.
attention. That's awesome. Now, John, something special about what you do with your books is oftentimes the proceeds of what you make on the book, you give those to different causes. And with this book specifically, you had a real mission for helping homeless people. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, the sales of this book, when money eventually comes to me, we like to donate to homeless shelters, and money from this book, Polly Petals, went to two shelters so far. Shelters of Saratoga, which is up in Saratoga, New York, and also there was one in Troy, New York, called Joseph's House, which got a check from this book proceeds. So we've helped with that. Other books, God Needed a Puppy, helped a lot of shelters.
Yeah.
Keller's Heart did some of that as well. Keller's, a lot of that I tried to gear it towards shelters to help pets that were disabled or maybe older and couldn't get adopted.
Yes.
So it's nice to take some of the proceeds and not, if not all of them, and just give them back to different charities. I haven't counted up all the money. It's got to be over $50,000 with all the books that's been donated to charity. And that's because people buy the books, and we've done a lot with donating books as well, or people sponsoring books that get donated to schools, especially schools where the kids don't have a lot of money and
Yeah.
can't afford books. So
Yeah.
it's my relationship with Paraclete's been really great that way. The publisher, who's bringing you this Zoom today, it's nice when you can do that and give back.
Well, it also is nice as a consumer to know, my book sale is not just to get a book into my house, but it's also helping other people. It's just wonderful.
Right. Right, right. And what's fun too is a lot of times with what places I donate to, I will ask people on the Facebook page who are buying the books, like nominate somebody, nominate a school, nominate a shelter, nominate, and they'll give me lists, and I will look into them, make sure that everything's legit, and then we'll sort of pick names out of a hat and and help out different things. It's amazing all the places, like just in the news in the last like 10 years, there was wildfires out west where horses got separated, and some were burned, and some of the money from some of the book sales helped those horses. There was even one up in Maine, somebody recommended. It was, they take in bear cubs who lose their parents, and they
Mm.
raise these little bear cubs, and we helped that charity. It just and a couple that help senior dogs that no one will adopt. Like they're 12 years old, their owner dies, and there's shelters just for dogs like that, and we've helped those. So it's been really kind of nice. It really has been. And domestic violence too, we helped, which shelters help people with that.
It's really amazing.
Any questions from anybody on the Zoom?
No, nobody's written in so far. You're welcome to write anything in, but if you don't have any questions, I thought we could just ask John for any upcoming events. There's a couple things, um, exciting new release, and I want you to.
Yeah, a couple. Well, I'll answer the one question no one's asked, but I get sometimes people stop me. They said, "Wasn't there going to be a movie made out of one of your books?" Manchester Christmas. Um, I'm still hopeful it's going to be a movie, but here's what happened with Manchester Christmas. A Hollywood director, producer named Brian Herzlinger, a really nice guy, California guy. He got the manuscript for Manchester Christmas, and he loved it so much he wanted to make a movie. He does a lot of movies for Lifetime and Hallmark. So he bought the rights to make the movie, and he was going to go raise some money and make this movie. It was going to be a little movie, but that's fine. In the process of shopping around looking for money, a bigger company saw the product and said to him, "We like this too. Why don't we buy the rights from you?" And he said, "Well, I want to be the director and I want to write the script." And they said, "That's fine. You can stay attached to it, but we want to do it for our company because this company was merging with something called GAC, Great American Country, which is a cable channel that has millions of viewers. They were just getting big into they wanted to sort of be a rival to Hallmark, the Hallmark channel, and they're still like the little engine that could GAC. So they bought the rights from Brian and attached him to it, and they sort of had disagreements over. He wrote an outline for the script, and they wanted to get rid of certain things like the dog in the script. They didn't want the dog because dogs are a pain in the butt. And so they were going back and forth, trying to get on the same page of what the movie should be. Because when you write a book, you never think it's gonna be just like the book. A lot of people here have read a book and watched the movie. They'll say, "Oh, I like the book better, but the movie was pretty good." Or they might say, "Oh, I love the movie. They did things I did." But in this case, they were going back and forth. Then COVID hit, so nothing happened in Hollywood for a couple of years. And then we came out of COVID, and I reached out to the people who bought the rights from Ryan and said, "You're going to make this book," and they said, "We're so far behind with all the other projects that were ahead of it that it's going to be on hold for a year or two." And I checked with them in January, and they said, "We're not doing it in 2024, maybe 2025." So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm comforted by the fact that movies like Castaway with Tom Hanks took 10 years to make, Back to the Future years to make. It's not uncommon in Hollywood for things to
Yeah.
get stalled. It's not a reflection on the, oh, it's a terrible story or it's not good. Sometimes it's a matter of money or an actor or a director. So I'm still hopeful that's going to happen. In terms of other things, I did write another novel. People have asked me, when am I going to write another novel? It's very different than the Chase series. It's truly a faith-based book. Um, and the premise of it is of the novel, which is now in editing with Paraclete, is what would happen if somebody who didn't so much not believe in God, but just thought, I have no use for any of that stuff. But she's a journalist for the Boston Globe. What if there were a series of miracles, alleged miracles happening around Boston, and she gets sent to sort of look into it and maybe discredit it and say, well, these really aren't miracles. This is what's really happening. There's no such thing as miracles. It's kind of her attitude going in. What would happen if she kind of looked into things and thought, you know what, I can't explain this. This might really be happening, and I can't explain it. What would that do in terms of her own faith and faith of those around her? And that's the premise of the novel. And I put my whole heart and soul into this book more than anything else I've ever written. With the exception maybe of God Needed a Puppy, because that was so personal to me with Samuel losing our puppy. Um, and usually my books take, because I write part-time in addition to being on TV and stuff, doing the news. I usually take about 6 months to write a book. I started this book like in August, and then really got into it in October, and then finished it in March. And then an editor was brought in and said, "We got to make a lot of changes. I want you to do it a certain way," and I had to redo a lot of it. So it ended up being about a 10-month process, almost twice as long to write this book. And it's actually going to be a little bit of a shorter book than the other books, believe it or not. But I'm very excited about it. And we're thinking about, I think Paraclete's thinking about like Easter time,
Yep.
bringing this book out. But
Yep.
if you ever seen the movie The Shack or like the book The Shack, I didn't model it after that, but it has that kind of a vibe where, when your faith is kind of shaken by the world, and all of us get our faith shaken because it's tough out there sometimes. It's tough how life can hand you some tough situations with loss, with sadness, with things that are just unfair. How your faith can get tested and how you can find your faith again. That was kind of that story. Um, I've sort of always danced around the edges of faith in my stories. It's always there. Anyone who's read Manchester Christmas knows that Chase it goes and rents an old church where she lives, and there's always some of that in my stories. But this one is more directly involved with that issue. And I think you'll like it. I love the characters in the story, which is always a good sign. We also are going to do. I don't want to give it away today. We're going to do another thing where I think we're going to try to get Keller's Heart books out to some more kids who maybe can't afford books. I'll have more of that coming up this weekend, and people can be involved because a lot of times we do these things, Catherine, and people say, "I saw the post, I didn't get to it. I wish, can I still do it?" And I'm like, well, the boat kind of sailed on that. Well, we'll do something again, and that's the case. We're going to do something again like that, but we'll announce that pretty soon.
Great. That's really exciting. Well, I think that wraps things up. I put a link to the new book in the chat in case anybody's interested in taking a peek. It's The Carpenter's Son by John Gray, coming out in April. And then, like we said at the beginning, Sweet Polly Petals is 15% off today on the website, no coupon code required. So it's just a great book, and you're giving back as well when you make the purchase.
Right. And for those again, like for Polly Petals, what happens with books is you buy a book today and it gets sent to you, and then months and months later, could be 6 months later, when the accounting gets settled out, they may send a check to me for a couple $100, saying, "Well, you sell 200 books. Here's $200." When that money comes through Poly Petals, whatever comes from that is going to get sent to a homeless shelter around the area somewhere. So if you do end up getting a book, just know that part of that, probably $1 of whatever you're spending, is going to end up helping somebody indirectly. So it's a nice thing to do. No questions. I can't believe it.
Well, we
This is
have,
what it's like. Go,
Chris
go.
Smith. Chris Smith says the girls and I have loved this. Thank you. We love you, John. That's
Oh,
great.
Chris, man, thank you, Chris. And for those who think my life is crazy having four dogs, this is really what they have. They get up at like 6, 7. They have their breakfast. They run around a little bit, and then this is nap time. So there's Rosie, there's Bella. He's still sleeping.
Uh,
And yep, Sebastian's out in the other room, but it's quiet. And I always make my pitch: don't be afraid to adopt a dog that's a little bit different because they're no more work. They're honestly they're sweet dogs. And I'm by the window. You probably can't see it. This yard outside is big. It's
oh yeah, nice.
but
Beautiful.
but Rosie who can't see or hear navigates the whole thing. So it's a lot of fun to watch her grow as a little puppy into a dog, and she's got it all down pat now. People ask me like her water dish is over to the right of the refrigerator. When she wants a drink, she just stands by it, doesn't bark, she just stands there, and she'll stand there for 10 minutes. You notice her, and then you go get water, and the minute you pour it, she's right into it.
Yeah.
And I always say with dogs that are blind, especially blind and deaf, because Keller was the same way. Their noses are super strong. I don't know what it is. Like you cannot. If I walked in with a hot dog and went upstairs with it, she would smell it and come upstairs and find me and say, "You have a hot dog," and I want a bite of that hot dog. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thanks, John. I
All
think
right, thank you so much, and thank you for being here. Um, and also, what I'll do is, if anybody buys the book today, I'll have Catherine put one name. I did a little book of short stories that we did to help with domestic violence. There's only a few; they're all gone, but I have a few of them left. I'll get a name from Catherine and address, and I'll sign a copy of that and mail it to somebody. So I get asked all the time, "Can I get that book?" I'm like, "You can't. It was only a one-time special thing."
yep.
But I've got about 10 of them left, and in my car, in the trunk of my car. So I'll grab one of those and send it in the mail to somebody if
Right.
they buy a book today.
Great.
Just as an extra thank you for being here and for buying a book.
Very good. Thanks, John. See you all
All right,
next
thank
week.
you. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Stay cool.
Okay. Bye-bye.